Hello everyone. My name is Amal Anoop. I'm working as the Human Resources Assistant at Capilano University, one of the public universities in North Vancouver, Canada. Today I'm really happy to be here to deliver this session on managing millennials and Gen Zers in classrooms or in colleges. So first of all, I appreciate the efforts taken by the organizers of this program to deliver such amazing contents to teachers like you. And it gives me immense pleasure to give back to the teaching community that really played an important role in molding me to who I am right now. And I really feel that it is one of the greatest professions in the world. So as per our Indian cultures, it is Mata, Pita, Guru, Devam. And I completely respectfully acknowledge that concept before I get on to the core of today's session. That is, how do we manage millennials and Gen Zs in college classrooms? Why should we even think about a different teaching model when it comes to teaching millennials and Gen Zers? So there's an interesting study that happened in 2019. This was conducted by didnt, and as per their 8th annual millennial survey, it was found that among 13,416 millennials and Gen Zers, the survey was conducted across 42 countries around the world, including Indian students as well. They reported that the traditional markers of achievement are no longer valued by millennials and Gen Zs. So just to be clear, millennials are the ones born after 1983, and Gen Zs are those people who are born after 1994. So just to make the clear definition. So many people use different metrics, but this is what I'm following right now. And I guess that is really important because this is the age group of people or students that you'll be addressing in your classrooms on a daily basis. The didnt study also brought another important fact about millennials and Gen Zs. This was the competence of students in constructing a knowledge through a facilitated approach is gaining momentum. Let me repeat that for you. The competence of students in constructing knowledge through a facilitated approach is gaining momentum. Teachers have assumed a different role that is more like a facilitator. So they're no longer teaching stuff from the materials or books, rather they're facilitating the knowledge or the learning experience in students. So I guess that concept is important. Growing from teachers, moving more towards facilitators. So that is one of the remarkable features that is seen in this survey. Now, why Gen Zers? Because millennials, we know a lot about millennials because that's the previous generation that we are talking about. Now, why do we need to specify Gen Zs? Now, one of the key features or few key features of Gen Zs are as follows. One, technology is a defining characteristic of Generation Z. So technology, you know how technology has evolved, right? So earlier, like take my case, when I did my undergrads and post-graduation, I was not a library going person. So you might be shocked to note that the only books that I've taken throughout my 5 years of college education by going to the library was 6 books, I guess 7 books. So all around 5 years, I've just taken 7 physical books, tangible physical books. But I've actually referred 100 or more than 100 books. But how did I do it? I moved from the physical book that has hundreds and maybe thousands of pages, and rather than going to the library and getting a book like this, all I did was I created a whole library of books in my laptop. So this little thing right here, which is lightweight and mobile, contains about 150 psychology books, which I'm truly indebted to for, I've been referring to this throughout my whole education, college education. So that's the power of technology. So you can integrate a whole lot of content to technology, and technology has evolved, right? So earlier you could have just told students, okay, see, look at that person, like say, look at Raju, who actually goes to library, takes a lot of books, and goes to home, studies his, does his work. And look at you, you're not even going to the library. But you cannot make that statement today, because God knows what those children are referring to, because they could even do it with their phones or on their tablets. So see what COVID has taken us. We never thought that a college going student or a university going student would swap that, or change the whole scenario, open a laptop and kind of log into classrooms like this, and delivering webinars like this. We never thought about this happening, but that has changed. So this is one of the key features of Gen Zs or Generation Zs. I'll come to that later. The next is that they learn more by creating or doing. So rather than learning a lot of books and theoretical aspects of it, they're more focused on functional tasks, like do stuff, create new things, so things like that. So that's another feature that distinguishes Generation Zs from the previous generations. Creativity plays an important role in Generation Zs. So that's another point. The fifth point is that they are only somewhat prepared for the future. So earlier, when maybe you can compare it with your generation or the previous generation, we used to have a clear, a future orientation given by our parents, because our parents used to put a lot of focus on learn this, learn that, and there should be a lot of comparison that we might have gone through in when you were in your school or college. And that's one of the reasons why we gave a lot of importance to marks and ranks and things like that. And we were really prepared for the future. By the time you reach 10th, you know what you need to take. By the time you reach 12th, you know what to take. After 12th, you know what to take. But the Gen Zs or Generation Zs, if you ask the same question, what do you want to become? They might just say, I just want to be a vlogger. I just want to be a YouTuber. I just want to be a YouTube content creator who focuses on roasting. That's another thing. A TikToker. So all these things have changed. And are they prepared for the future? Well, in terms of academics, only somewhat. Another distinguishing feature is they focus a lot of creativity in classroom. So rather than sticking onto books, which confines their creativity within the contents of the textbooks or syllabus, they focus a lot more on creative stuff. So I know that there is a lot of challenge from the teacher's perspective, because right from the beginning of an academic year, especially Indian education, Indian educators, one of the biggest problems that we face are a lot of holidays in between, a lot of strikes, like, a lot of hartals and band, things like that. So all these things obstruct the free flow of classes, like what we have, like say in North America or like developed countries like that, where the day loss is like very, very less. Because if you see the calendar here, I would say it's just black. You cannot find any red markings as you can find in the Indian calendars. So that's one of the remarkable features. So it puts a lot of pressure on teachers like you to ensure that such a lot of syllabus should be covered within that given time period. And within that, you will have paper evaluations, you'll have to do the clerical work, like uploading marks, things like that. So there's a lot of pressure on the end of teachers as well. But the solutions that I'll be providing here will be completely based on my experience being a student who has been in Indian education system, and it won't be something that will be completely detached from what you do. So I can assure you that. So what are the main characteristics? One is visual learning. So the newer generation focuses a lot on visual learning. So rather than reading pages from books, which they say, oh my God, I need to read this, this, and this. But the same content, if you make into YouTube videos, they'll just sit and watch and learn stuff. So that's the difference between visual learning. So you see some stuff, then you learn. You know, one of the reasons why the generation Zs are focusing more on visual learning? Say if you are going to a mall, say if you are inside a bus or a train, what is the common behavior of the new parents these days? So if their child starts to cry, all they will do is take a YouTube video of like Dora or like some cartoon character and play the video, give it to that small child who's just like 1 year or 2 years old, and then the child just watches this video like this and this and this, and they're so much involved in it that I've seen that they're mesmerized and they're hypnotized by seeing that video, and they don't even care about what is happening around, right? So your learning is completely becoming visual. Earlier, we used to, like, parents used to tell stories, or they might used to, like, show examples of real life people, right? Say, look at that man, look at the bangle seller, maybe if it's in the train. Okay, look at the sights outside. Take the smell. So there was a lot of learning that was happening outside this. But now, unfortunately, people are focusing more on visual learning, which I'm not saying that it's all bad, but we need to change our education system in such a way that make changes in the education, not the system, make changes in the way you deliver the classes, so that you need to take into consideration that they are visual learners. So using visual tools would be really, really, really helpful in teaching them a concept. Another thing is learn at their own pace. Now, this is really important. This is where the personality and the individual traits of a person or a student becomes really important. Because not all students have the same IQ levels or EQ levels. They have their own, some people may have, learning disabilities, some may be dyslexic, things like that. So everyone has a pace of their own. The pace at which I might be learning a thing would be different from the pace at which you might be learning some things. So that's the point of thing. So one of the biggest characteristics that distinguishes this generation from the previous one is that they want to learn at their own pace. Is that a negative? Well, absolutely not. If we have some metrics, if we mention that you need to complete a certain thing within a certain period of time, then that becomes a much more achievable for them, rather than saying that you need to complete this assignment tomorrow. So the next distinguishing feature is shorter attention span. This is really important. So another characteristic is that the new generation students, they cannot focus too much at a time. So their attention span is shorter, which kind of makes it challenging for teachers like you to deliver classes. Because you might not be getting their attention, because say if you put a presentation for 1 hour, the maximum that they could focus will be the first 20 minutes. So if you exceed, all the 40 minutes is just like gone to the air. So it won't be effective at all. So make sure that the content that we deliver, it's not too long. I'll come to that later. So all these are characteristics I'll define and elaborate on this later. And the last point is expect information to be delivered to them. Expect information to be delivered to them. So it's just like, the whole term called Googling is a new term, right? Say before 2003 or before 2004, we didn't even have this concept of Googling, right? The synonym of search has now become Google across the world, right? So that's exactly how the generation Z expects the information to be delivered to them. So this is another characteristic feature that distinguishes millennials and Gen Zers especially from others. All right, now let me go on to the challenges. So the challenges, I've actually limited that to 4. You can go on and on and on, but still I've actually focused on the major 4 challenges that millennials and Gen Zers would be facing in a college classroom. So the first challenge is expectation that the college education will lead to job skills. Once again, expectation that the college education will lead to job skills. No. Why is this important? Now, one study that was conducted by Buckner and Strasser expresses the concern that the millennials tend to see the college as a job training program, their ticket to employment after graduation. All right. So the result may be a sense of academic entitlement and a lack of appreciation for course content that is unrelated to employable skills. Now, this is one of the biggest challenges that you might face in the classrooms. So the millennials and Gen Zers focus more on the skills or the portions of the course that would help them to gain a job or help them to do a specific job in the future. So that is the focus. So there is a tendency for the newer generation to completely ignore those course content which does not help them to get a job in the future. So this is actually a flip side, because this can be seen in their performance and the marks that they receive in certain subjects. So this is a huge challenge. So this again relates to another problem that is called educational entitlement. So that is the second challenge that I'm mentioning here. So the first challenge is that they consider college degree as a means to acquire the skills that would help them to get jobs, and they tend to ignore those subjects which does not help them to get jobs. I hope you understand. The next concept is academic entitlement. Now, what is academic entitlement? Now, as a general definition, academic entitlement refers to the tendency of some children to expect good marks and positive feedback for their schoolwork, regardless of the quality of work or the amount of effort that they put in. Now, this is something that you might have seen in your professional career a lot, right? So there are the students. So say you give an examination, right? And then after the exams, they come to you and they ask you, "Ma'am, this was not taught in the class. Ma'am, this was a practical application question. We didn't expect this. You didn't mention that this thing was there for the exam." This is an example of academic entitlement, because people or students tend to expect good marks, or they expect positive feedback for the work or the effort that they've not put in. You know what I mean? So that's the main concept. So academic entitlement is a bigger crisis for millennials as well as Gen Zers. So what are the common tendencies of academic entitlement that are seen in students today? So there are some common responses to grades that you might be able to relate to. One is, "I studied really hard, and so I'm glad that I got good mark." So this is a normal, kind of response that you can expect from a student, right? So yeah, I studied really good, and I got really good marks. So the student studies well, and he or she gets a good mark. The next common response is, "I hardly didn't do any study, but I can't believe I got good mark." So I hardly didn't do any study, but I can't believe I got good mark. So this is another common response that you can see in the newer generations right now. So there are 2 or 3 interpretations for this. One is that the student did not actually study, but by luck, they got the marks. Second, there are students who actually did study, but in order to show off to the other students or the teacher, they might just pretend to say that, "Oh, I didn't do any study, but I got good marks." So here there's actually a confusion between effort and result, right? So let me go to the next response. The next response is, "I studied really hard and I still got a bad mark." So here the student has taken a lot of effort, but the result is what not he or she or they expected them to receive. And another response is, "I didn't really study, so that this mark seems to be reasonable." So I didn't really study, so this mark is reasonable. So this is another response. And some other responses is that, "I don't care. I mean, the school is stupid." And the last response is, "This mark is unfair. This mark is unfair." So these are the different responses to grades. So as I mentioned, the best response to, like, when you compare all these responses, the best would be a realistic response. So if a person is able to relate, if a student is able to relate his performance to the effort that he or she or they have put in, that would be the most ideal response to it. I hope this point is really clear. So this is really important. So as teachers, the main your main aim, or the major aim, would be to establish a relationship between effort and results. And this is something that is not being seen in the newer generations, because they do not know what effort needs to be put to receive a certain, or to result in a specific level of performance. So let me just take you to what are the ways to prevent this sort of an academic entitlement. So as I've mentioned before, academic entitlement is one of the most distinguishing and remarkable features. And if you are able to prevent this, then you'll be able to make sure that the students in your classroom learns their portions really well. And beyond that, you can ensure that they're really happy and peaceful, I would say. So the first thing is that don't focus on material, focus on the content and concept. So there are certain students who are maybe not really good at learning things exactly as per the textbook, or the content. For them, it would be an added stress if you focus more on, have you prepared this? Have you prepared that? Have you prepared this? Especially just before the examinations and things like that. The next is challenge the students in a gentle manner. So one of the things that the students require at this point of time is that they need to be challenged. It's not that you don't have to see thinking about all the things that psychologists might say, okay, that creates anxiety, this creates, a stress to them. You don't actually have to keep away from challenging them. Do positive challenging, like say before the exams or things like that. You can constantly challenge the students by saying that, how far have you covered? What is your level of understanding of this subject? Have you really learned that? So I'm not talking about the time just before the exams, but you can constantly challenge the student by engaging in healthy conversations. Maybe you can ask them, like, I'm pretty sure that you might not have learned this topic. I challenge you. Have you learned it? So focus and challenge them to learn specific tasks at a certain point of time. So that will really help them to understand the concept well. And always try to establish a relationship between effort and grades. So you need to take really good effort to get really good grades. So this is a relationship that you need to establish, because earlier you don't actually have to take a lot of effort to teach the generation before these Gen Zers and millennials to the importance about grades. But today it has become really important that you establish the relationship between effort and grades. I will tell you why that is so in the next part of my presentation, but right now try to establish that link. Next, talk about the responsibilities of students, teachers, and parents. So this is really very important. So what we've seen is that, like in our colleges, when you start, there's an orientation session for parents and students, right? So parents and students come together, they meet the teacher and they attend the orientation, and then they go. The next time that they're meeting is during the open house, or when you have a parent-teacher meeting, right? So the biggest problem with that is that it usually happens before the examinations, right? So you don't have much of a time or much flexibility to teach the student about what his responsibilities are, or what the parents' responsibilities are, what the teacher's responsibilities are. No. So this is something that you need to do constantly. It's not that you should always frequently hold parent-teacher meeting. No. But at the beginning of the academic year, like say after you complete a few portions, it would be really nice if you have a conversation with a student, a one-to-one conversation with the student, by identifying what are their strengths, weaknesses, and what they need to focus more on, and then tell them or teach them their responsibilities. It is really important. So always talk about their responsibilities, and just give them scenarios, like practical applications of learning this course, and tell them that they are responsible for their future in the initial days of the course, not when they reach the sixth semester, or not when they reach the final year. Then you need to say, you know what, you need to learn more, you need to be more responsible. No, this should start at the beginning of the semester. So in that way, you can teach him or her or them what their responsibilities are, and then by constantly giving this input, you can create a sense of responsibility and also try to establish the link between effort and their grades. And the last thing is that you need to be confident about the grades that you put. So teachers, you have all the right to put the grades that you feel like, because you don't have to modify the grades or alter it if the student comes and persuades you by saying, oh teacher, I did my best and I had to do that, and I did my best, and it's unfair that you've graded me lower, so please give me higher grades. No, don't do it, because that exactly adds to their academic entitlement, because they feel entitled that if you persuade, if you actually create that feeling of sympathy in teachers, then you'll be able to get higher grades. The biggest problem with that is, as you might have heard, this teacher is partial to this student, this teacher is partial to that student. Okay, let's just set that aside. Always grade objectively. Just forget about it. Just follow your gut feeling, and if you've graded, that's it. The next important challenge that the newer generation faces today is helicopter parenting. So helicopter parenting is another phenomenon that you might have come across your professional life very often, right? So helicopter parenting is also defined as over-parenting. This happens when parents give too much of importance to their children. They help them too much, like to do their assignments, their college work, like even taking them to college if they're running late, and feeding, like spoon feeding them with information, helping them do projects or assignments that they are supposed to do. So all these things result in over-parenting. So a lot of your students today are victims of overparenting. I'm using the term victims because it actually results in adding to their anxiety, and then it makes them more stressful. So a lot of your students may really want to genuinely learn a lot, but then due to the helicopter parenting or over parenting, then it really becomes hard for them to do it. So to realize that they are going through all these challenges is really important to modify the course in such a way that they won't be left alone. And it is also, studies have found that it also results in reduced self-esteem in adolescents and a lower ability to show leadership. So how can we tackle this issue? So if you really find that there's a student who is not coming forward, who is not taking initiative for leadership or skills like that, you need to emphasize on those students. So you might be having the first benchers, right? Always first benches are really easy for you to handle. But it is really, really important that you handle the backbenchers or the silent ones as well. Now comes the most important challenge, the fourth and the most important challenge, technology. So as I mentioned before, like the way how we changed the name of search to Google, today we are exposed to a lot of technological innovations today. So today's world evolves completely around technology. So all the information is available on the fingertip. So children have access to YouTube lectures and classrooms like Byju's or like Khan's Academy or umpteen number of free lectures that are available in YouTube. So it's high time that we relate our classroom learning and integrate technology into this learning methodology so that our education will not seem to be boring for the students. So one of the problems that I noted when I was doing my college days, it was not the problem with the teachers. We didn't have the infrastructure to do that. We never had a digital integration ever. It was only for the presentations that we had to carry the projector, which was inside the staff room. I had to carry the projector and go to another classroom or lab. You need to fix a projector and do the presentation. And if another presentation is happening at the same point of time, there is no projector. So what you need to do is open your laptop, and all 15 or 16 of them in our master's class had to look to the screen, which is like 14 or 15 inches, which was actually bad, right? So there was no integration of digital or technology, even in like 2016 when I was doing my master's. So we were so away from technology, which is not the case right now. In Gen Zers, especially, it's going to be really hard, especially as I've mentioned, they're visual learners. So it's really important that you integrate some visual learning tools like videos or like interactive sessions or examples of TED videos, TED or TEDx videos. Those really help in the teaching as such. There are some times when you cannot give all the examples in the classroom through the textbooks. In such situations, all you need to do is YouTube videos. Just play some YouTube videos regarding to your subjects, and that's much more easier on your side, and it's more effective on the student side because it helps them understand concepts really well. And look how COVID has changed the situation. We did not even think of a situation where the college going students or the university students will just have to open their tab or mobile phone or laptop and log into the classes. I didn't imagine even in 2020. In January 2020, I had no idea that this would happen. But today, in this month of June of 2020, when we are looking back, how far have we progressed within that 4 to 5 months? Everything has moved online, like classes like this, webinars, seminars, everything has gone online. And we are exploring the massive potential of the digital media today. So which brings me to the solutions for the ultimate solutions to handle millennials and Gen Zs in today's college classrooms. So the flipped classroom model gained its prominence in 1993, and by later part of 1997, this was actually formed. So let me just explain this model to you. The first process of the cycle is content delivered outside of class. And the next step is active learning. So the students, they have to prepare based on the content. So you can maybe give them a case study or maybe give them a portion from the textbook that they need to learn. It needn't be YouTube lectures or videos or any of those interactive content, but it could even be a small portion that they need to cover. So the next part is that they need to actively learn. Once again, let me emphasize, this is a day-to-day thing. It is not to be done as an assignment or a project at the end of a semester. No, it's a day-to-day class that I'm talking about. So then the students should be assigned the specific topics so they actively learn. And the next thing is that they actively engage in that. So there is a student engagement happening. And then, so when they come to the classroom on the next day, so they have the student engagement, and then faculty or teachers act as coaches and mentors. So that is where this whole thing happens. So the content is delivered outside the class, active learning happens, and then once they come to the classroom, they're engaged, and then faculty members act as mentors or coaches. So if they're making mistakes, then you need to correct. And then the students solve the problems, like you can give maybe quizzes or ask them a few questions right at that point of time, and this process continues again. So this is called the flipped classroom model. So rather than the information flowing from the teacher, like teaching everything, the students becomes teachers by themselves, and you play an active role as mentors or facilitators. Now the actual model is shown in this manner. So this is actually the model as per the flipped classroom is 5 minutes of welcome, 5 minutes of quiz, 5 minutes of explaining the activity, 45 minutes of activity, and 15 minutes of debriefing. So what are the aims? The first is encouraging student-faculty contact. Rather than you teaching them the entire thing and they getting bored, there's a give and take. There's a conversation style of engagement here. And encouraging cooperation among students and encouraging active learning. So one of the biggest challenges that the corporates are facing right now is that the students are lacking cooperative skills. They don't have the necessary group skills or leadership skills and creativity. So Tasks like this helps them move away from the mere materials of the textbook and rather helps them to cooperate and work together and indulge in active learning, and it helps them achieve a lot of things. And frequent student-faculty interaction motivates students to engage with their classwork and does collaboration and sharing of ideas with other students. So it helps them be more creative. So when they share their ideas and their creativity, it's not just them that is learning from them, but their other classmates as well. So it increases their creativity as well. And other thing is that it improves their understanding about the subject really well. And they also have an idea of their knowledge and they have this awareness. So as we mentioned in the initial part of the presentation, the effort and the result, it becomes clear. The responsibility, it becomes clear, right? So the student is held responsible for learning or not learning a specific topic. So in that way, the actual concept of imparting knowledge is understood by the students. All right, when the final part of this is the benefits. So from different studies, it was proved that increased time for engaging instruction. So this was one of the benefits. Another benefit is that lectures can be viewed as often a need for to understand a topic, and recorded lectures are more time efficient. So once you do a lecture like this, like say if you want to switch to an interactive mode, you take all your effort to record a lecture once, then until and unless the subject or the syllabus changes, you don't actually have to make a change in it. So you know how hard it is to deliver a lecture, right? So recorded lecture, if you record it just once and then until the new syllabus changes, then you can use the same recorded lecture as content to be delivered to the students. So like study this lecture. So you're giving that video as a homework assignment. Let them go through and see that video lecture and do the assignment for the next day. And as I've mentioned before, these classes are not meant to be 1 hour long. They are just meant to be like 20 minutes. 20 minutes, but it does make a huge difference. The next point, as I've mentioned, is students learn at their own pace. So say if they, as I've mentioned before, right? So if they have any questions, they can ask or repeat and things like that. So it's really efficient. It really helps them. So as I've mentioned before, some students might not have the caliber to learn it in the first go. For those students, they won't be felt like they've left alone, right? So it is really helpful for them. And the last point is that the flipped classroom technique is good for teaching procedural knowledge, which is a knowledge about how to do something such as problem solving or an accounting problem. Like for financial management, when I was doing my course here in Canada, I found it really hard to do financial management and operating the financial calculator, as it had to be followed in a procedure, in a sequence, right? So every single time when the professor was teaching, I had to write down every single point, and then when I skipped a point, then I lose the whole track of it. And the whole class for the next, as here the classes are about like 2 hours, to some classes go about like 2.5 hours. Oh my God, if you skip that one step, then you can't keep on asking the professor, right? There's about like 50 or 40 students in the classroom. So you can't be keeping on asking questions. I found it really hard to follow. But with the recorded lectures, especially with the procedural knowledge, it is really helpful. So a majority of the portions can be delivered in the flipped classroom model. But there are certain things that cannot be done this way. Well, given all the freedom, you can do the traditional classes in that way as well. Now, before I conclude, I know this is a huge topic, but due to the time constraint, I need to conclude. But one thing that you need to keep in your mind is respect. Any person would love to get respect. So respect is something that we give and we get. For any students for that matter, if you give a lot of respect in their classroom and respect their emotions, respect their sentiments, respect their feelings, it would remarkably help you. Beyond that, it would really help them to become really good students and really good human beings. Because a simple sign of respect would be really helpful for them to open up to you. I'm just reminded of the instance, that unfortunate event that happened today is the death of Sushant Singh Rajput, one of the promising actors, due to depression. Clinical depression is such a situation, right? It's hard to explain. You can't actually make out that a person is depressed or not from just seeing him or her. They might be pretending to be happy from the outside, but they might be really, really suffering a lot from the inside. So that's a characteristic feature of clinical depression. But as teachers, since you are the first point of contact and you are spending hours of the productive time with the adolescents or these Gen Zers, as I've mentioned here, you'll be able to explore a lot of their problems as well. So if you respect their emotions and feelings, you could even avert a disaster. You could even be their best friend where they can express a lot of those things, because the new generation values that a lot. So they see more of you as a, kind of a senior friend rather than a teacher who commands you to do certain kind of things. So with that, I conclude today's session by thanking Kokila ma'am and Sambat sir, who gave me this opportunity to deliver the session. And as always, I thank all of you who are watching this at this point of time. And thank you so much for your time. And I really appreciate this opportunity and this program. Thank you so much and have a great day.